So I haven't done one of these in a while. I got about a half-hour drive, so I figured I'll take advantage of a little bit of that time. Yesterday, I brought out a horse that I hadn't done anything with in at least a year. And then I looked back to older videos and found out that there was a year between when I had started him and then rode him again. So there's like 2 videos of haven't ridden this horse in a year, and I'm not really sure. I didn't watch the other video, so I'm not sure how he compared with another year off. He only had 60 days, and truthfully, I don't know how much of that were actual riding days. He had 60 days of getting started. That's gonna rock, isn't it? That's annoying. So how many of those days he was actually being ridden, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back and look at all the videos and see, but I'm gonna say the horses probably had 25 rides. And then he was supposed to go home. I ended up buying him. Instead of him ever going home, he just stayed. And then he became the old saying about a shoemaker's shoes, the ones with the holes in them. He became one of my horses, and therefore became lower on the priority list of a horse that I did anything with on a regular basis. He fell kind of the wayside. I rode him 3 times, one time being that year video since I purchased him. Yesterday was the first time that I rode him since the last time I rode him. Now it was interesting because it's different than what I was expecting. Is he retained things, but the uncertainty in his stride led me to believe that maybe there were some uncertainties that he never got through prior to getting all this time off. I originally did very little on the ground because he's good on the ground, and then I did bareback pad, walk trot, and he struggled a little bit with the trot, like the uncertainty of I trotted 4 strides, is that enough? He wasn't being bad, he was being concerned about his certainty about what he was supposed to be doing. I lost a lot of impulsion and moved on to the saddle, and partially why I moved on to the saddle was because I figured if I could get him into a rising trot, I could create more impulsion through my activity, through my energy. I actually was unsuccessful in doing that, or minimally successful in doing that. I was able to get a nice rising trot, but for the most part, I would say the only thing that I accomplished there was more consistency. The canter, when it came time to ask for the canter, I had no impulsion. I had no energy coming from him whatsoever. So I knew there was just no way I was going to be able to ask for the canter and be successful in getting the canter, because if he's got no get up and go at the trot, the only thing I could have likely accomplished was a really fast, confused, scared run, but yet probably not even break into the canter. And if he did break into the canter, it would not be with an education. It would be out of, I'm running so fast I have no choice but to break into this next gear. A lot of times that's where the pieces in a horse's training get broken. I get called for a lot of horses that are dangerous at the canter, not because they buck, but because they like run into the canter and then they fall out of the canter. The canter itself is very non-rhythmic and difficult difficult to sit or to actually ride. And it's often just an education. It's often just confusion on the horse's part, or even in like Logan's case, he's more likely to come off with a fear-based reaction to things. So it was in my best interest to get off of him and ask him to canter with the cue that he understands back on the ground, and then get back on. So that way it's really very fresh in his mind as, okay, that cue means canter when you tell it to me on the ground. Now you're on my back doing the same thing. I wonder if they're more likely to give it a try. So I got my canter. A couple things I had done different before I got back on was I tied a string off of one of my sticks to my saddle to use as driving energy if necessary. I couldn't remember, having started him, if he did have impulsion issues, and I carried a dressage whip for motivation, where I would tap him on the shoulder. I'm kind of thinking I remember that. I'm also kind of thinking I remember just carrying my string attached to my saddle, or even attached to me. I might have even had my string attached around my waist where I would be able to use it then. So I used the string option, and when he was on the ground, it tickled his belly, it bounced against him and it tickled his belly and stuff, and it got him kind of sucked up, and he tucked his tail under himself, and he told me in that body language that I'm scared enough that I might have a physical reaction to this. But he also had a calmness about that told me, and if I do, I'm not going to commit to full-on bronking out. I'm probably just going to bounce. So I was pretty confident that when I got back on, that not only was I going to experience that, but I was also going to experience only that. I got back on, and I just, picked up the string so it didn't dangle, and, took more control of it. And I was able to get my canter, and I got my canter to the left, I believe, and it did involve some kind of popping action, like popping up into the canter and then kind of popping down into the trot, so he was kind of doing some acrobatics, but he wasn't really trying to like get me off or even acting fearful enough for me to be like, ooh, I better backtrack even more. I did choose to not go the other direction. I did choose to ask him for the canter, and where I picked my quitting spot was based on, I asked for it, he responded appropriately, he cantered 3 or 4 strides confidently, and then although he broke back down to the stop on his own, he didn't do it abruptly or froze. How sometimes horses that are confused in a gait, they'll literally slam on the brakes and freeze. He didn't freeze into his stop. He just kind of came down to a stop. I could have drilled him more, and this is the kind of horse that you could drill him more and it could be beneficial to him, or you could drill him more and it could have put fuel on whatever little fire was smoldering. So either way probably would have gone fine yesterday, but I had already spent probably an hour and a half with him and all the other things that I had done, and that was a good thing to leave him to soak on. I asked for the canter, he picked up the canter. I asked for him to do it with confidence. He cantered 3 strides, 4 strides with confidence. He did come down out of the canter on his own, but he came down more like, was that enough? Not like, oh, was I supposed to do that? So I chose that to be my quitting point yesterday. My point of kind of bringing all that into detail was to say there were multiple times that I redid things from the ground. Okay, he had spooked a couple times at the trot at my other saddle that was sitting on the rail, and it got to the point to where I was like, I'm stupid to not address this. I'm stupid to not help him through this. He was just shouldering away, but his stride changed as he went by. So I knew that I was dealing with something that could be building as opposed to something that was being resolved. So I got off and I asked him to go around me in a circle and to pass the saddle. And the quickening of his stride at the saddle, the shouldering in towards me, away from the saddle, those things were a little more evident when he was even more reliant on himself and I wasn't on him to support him. I then realized that he's not going to, he's just going to keep flipping on the blinder when he goes by. He's not going to process it on his own. There was no self-resolution going to happen. So what I did was I asked him to go put his nose on the saddle. And he did that a couple times. And then I changed. So I visualize things. So I wanted him to go put his nose on the saddle. So what I do is I visualize what it will look like. Like what that next picture in my mind is going to be when I'm staring at this horse with his nose on the saddle. Like I have that image in my mind, and that is something that horses really respond to very well. So I asked him to go look at the saddle, which he did. Well, then I decided that I wanted to kiss him forward to walk past the saddle. Well, I was kissing him forward to go to the saddle, so kissing him forward to go past the saddle was now confusing. I had my options. My options were, you need to understand this means two different things, or help him know that his bigger efforts that he was putting into putting his nose on the saddle, because now he was putting even greater efforts into putting his nose on the saddle. He'd look at me and I'd kiss to see if I could ask him to go past the saddle, and then he would make a more confident step at the saddle, put his nose on the saddle, and be like, is this what you want? Since it was what I originally wanted, I can't tell him now, no, I want you to go past the saddle. So I had to help him through that part. So how I did that was and unfortunately my audio didn't work on the video, so you're not going to hear any of my explanation to the people that were there. But very big thing in the road. What I ended up doing, and if you could heard me, I would have explained it. I did explain it. What I was going to do is I was going to then walk over to him, let him know that he did a great job. Because at one point he even said, I know you're asking for more, but I don't know what you're asking for. And he stepped over with his front feet sideways at least 3 steps to come to me, as to say, I know that you wanted me to do this, but it doesn't seem like it's pleasing you anymore. What do you want me to do? Is there something different? Like, that was that communication between him and I. And instead of saying, well, I wanted you to walk past you, dummy, I decided that I would go over to him and then walk him with him past the saddle. The next circle he was able to do, because he understood that now my kiss and my point is to walk. It's the little things like that. If you take the time and recognize how much effort your horse is putting into what he thinks you want and what it might have meant last time. I get a perfect example. That meant something different when I initially told him to kiss forward. I wanted him to go put his nose on something. I didn't want him to walk in a circle. Now, the exact same thing. It's like using the same word for something. The exact same thing now meant something different. That wasn't fair. Not fair without more communication. So I'm hoping that the people that watch kind of understood that as being something like, hey, do we do this to our horses very often? Like, We tell our horses to move away from us when we're standing on the cross ties. We tell our horses to move away from us. The best one is when people kiss. They kiss for the horse to go. They kiss for the horse to stay. They kiss for the horse to come to them. They kiss just because they want to kiss at the horse. If you want your kiss to mean something, it has to have a solid definition. You can't have it mean a variety of things and then expect your horse to respond appropriately based on your mood right now or based on your intentions right now. Like I said, visually, the horses can pick up on a lot of your intentions, but, just walking up to a horse at a fence and going, would make my horses leave. It wouldn't bring my horses to you. My horses would go, because that means go. But I know I watch that all the time, and I don't feel like that's a big thing to most people to realize. Like I don't think it's something that clicks. Like, you realize you're telling your horse to go, you're telling your horse to come, you're telling your horse to move away, you're telling your horse to get closer to you. You're telling, mine means go forward, and then based on the number of kisses, what gait, what gear. That's all that mine means. Mine does not mean take a step. Mine does not mean go sideways, go backwards, go whatever. My kisses always mean go forward, and then depending on how many kisses, what gear to be in. But I'm trying to think. So, and then, when he wasn't impulsive enough for the canter, I could have just, kicked on him or whatever. He thought he was doing the best thing he could be doing. He was trotting nice, heavy duty. Yes, I'm doing good. I maintained his trot as opposed to when I was in the bareback pad. He was confused by his trot. So there was an improvement. And that's the other thing too, is we have to look for our improvements. There was an improvement from the bareback pad to the saddle. He went from uncertainty in his stride to stopping every 3 or 4 strides, not sure if he's doing it right. His uncertainty was in his feet. His uncertainty was in his job. He didn't know what he was being asked to do. Once I put him in the saddle and I was able to help him with my rising trot, I was able to post him forward, so to speak. He got a better idea of, yes, it is the trot you're looking for. I can maintain that for you. And then, I was able to maintain my trot. So huge improvement. Like we have to always see where the improvements are and not expect mountains to move. But recognizing that I did not have, no matter how heavy duty, strong posting, no matter what I did, my current circumstances, without anything to drive him forward as far as like a dressage whip or the rope, I had no other way other than kicking him, which I would not do. I had no other way to ask him for the canter and have him understand it. So the best thing I could do for my horse, and the best thing you could do for your horse in that situation, is to get off of the horse, get back on the ground, and then reinstall or brush off the blurriness about I'm asking for the canter. I didn't even ask for the canter. I knew better. So I got on the ground and I brushed off the potential confusion that we were going to run into. I preemptively said, this is what I'm going to ask you for, and I want to make sure you're prepared. And then when I got back on him, he had an understanding of what I was going to ask him for, picked up the canter. Yes, he did it with uncertainty in his feet about, is this what I was supposed to do? But the improvement was, he did it finally when I asked. He did it for a couple strides, and he came out of it quietly. I could have, gone kicking on him or whatever, and I could have possibly gotten a canter result. I would not have gotten a canter result with an education. I would have gotten a fear-based canter result. So, long-winded, but basically saying, always be prepared to break it down. Always be prepared to preemptively prepare your horse for things that you're going to ask for next if it does not seem like your horse is ready. don't just ask for it because, well, I taught him this once before, so he should know it. Because he may not. You know, Logan didn't come out of the stall as sharp as I thought he would in the terms of I didn't prepare him. I didn't say, hey, we're gonna do this pretend, haven't been on you in a year, but let's review today, and then tomorrow everybody will think you're just magical. Like, didn't do something like that. I brought out the horse that I hadn't ridden in a year, and I wanted to show what a strong foundation can offer. He was rustier than I thought he would be, but he was by no means an unstarted, dangerous, oh my god, I can't believe I tried to get on him kind of horse. So, and it's just because I can promise him I'm always going to help him if I think he's in trouble. Always. And that's a promise that you should make to